What's up, Digidestins? This is Kyle D, better known as RideMyAvatar, and today we're going to be going over the Bt-10 meta. We have about 500 plus decks to look over. This has been for the course of the weeks. We know we're getting into EX3 by next Friday, but I figured by now we kind of know what the meta is going to look like. Any more data is just going to skew it even further. There's nothing that's really going to climb higher, so we kind of will go over it and explain. So let's dive into video and talk about it. So Crossheart is kind of being the big bad with the format. The reason is it's such a very fast-paced deck. It doesn't care about removal as much. And that's kind of the big thing about it, is that in a way, shape, or form, it doesn't have the weakness like other decks do, where, yeah, it's just going to hide into security. And that's a big thing you have to play into account, is that there's just a lot of decks that just play hide and go seek. And now everything now is starting to be more tamer focused. We're kind of like, this is going to mirror kind of like the hybrid format. So think about it. That's why we have Crossheart, Yellow Hybrid, Blue Flare, X Antibody Alphamon this time around. But that's just because the OTK decks are starting to climb back up in favor, because they're starting to realize that the only way you really counter control or decks that kind of use a broken card are decks that really don't care if you lose out on it, and they'll just rebuild the stack pretty quickly and then go back into your face. So that's kind of what's happening here, is that the format's kind of dependent on a few things. One thing I've noticed about Blue Flare is that it tanked in playability once people started realizing that you don't have to worry about your source being stripped away, because one, X Antibody Alphamon and, you know, our good friend Grandis really don't care about source removal. You stun it later, that's fine. I mean, we're just going to apply pressure and just remove you off the board anyway, so you're not going to have enough security to survive the turn. And that's kind of why Blue Flare has just been seeing a slight downtick, is because they're in a point where some of the top decks that are now pushing up are decks that are just don't care that you strip the source. Whoop-de-doo, either I'm going to build up a bunch more or I'm just not going to care. So that's kind of the big issue with Blue Flare at the moment, is that it kind of got shut down. But it's going to be one of those things that I'm going to tell you this right now. Do expect Blue Flare to be lower end. We might see it atop a few events and stuff like that in the beginning, but once the meta stabilizes in Crossheart and Yellow Hybrid, I'm going to be honest with you, expect Jessamon, Grandis, X Antibody, Dark Knightmon, Yellow Hybrid, and Crossheart. Blue Flare is just going to probably tank pretty quickly. Yes, it's a very powerful, explosive deck, but I feel like that's what we're going to see, is just this fall to the wayside. And if Yellow Hybrid does get hit, there is another substitute in the form of security control. And that just started coming in more and more because people are less playing a dedicated plan, because it doesn't really matter what you do against it. Because, well, a delicate plan, not a dedicated. A delicate plan. Sorry, I know I'm going to try to work on saying the word properly, but that's what's kind of happening until they start jamming that back into all decks. I mean, and plus the problem comes down to is Venusmon is a thing, and then we do have Sukuyamon's maiden mode that is just ridiculously broken, and we'll dive in more about that shortly after. So, I mean, it kind of starts feeling in because we got Dark Knightmon, X Antibodies, Jessamon, Grandis, Garurumon X Antibody, Mastemon. You know, that started coming back because it's a good mid-range deck. Gaiomon, basically, you know, Black War Greymon's counterpart, and that's just because it actually does pretty decent against Crosshearts and Yellow Hybrid, because you're popping the Tamer anyway and getting them off the board, and that now loses their synergy. So I wouldn't be surprised if Gaiomon, Black War Greymon kind of sees a little more play, depending on what the format is kind of calling for. So just keep that in the back of your mind. War Greymon, X Antibodies, got 8. D-Brigade is slowly creeping back up, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more D-Brigade on our end, because D-Brigade is a fan favorite, and I wouldn't be surprised how good it is. Magnamon X, basically Armor Rush. We're looking at 8. Bloomlord got about 8 tops so far. D-Reapers slowly creeping in at 7. Imperial Dramon 6. Sukuyamon itself, the maiden mode, you know, the cost options, about $5, 5 of them. Security Control, about 5. Got Minervamon Loop, and that's about 5. Beelzemon, about 4. 3 on to Bellastar. Ragnar Lordmon, about 2. Gallantmon, about 2. Eosmon, about 2. Pulsemon, that was a surprise to me. They had 1 top. Bagra Army, 1 top. Ragnar Black War Machine Dramon, about 1. Discard Aggro, which is going to be a very interesting list. I could be wrong, but might see more of this. RideMyAvatar 1. Megazoo, that was very interesting. Shivamon is about 1. Diaboramon 1. Magnadramon X Antibody 1. You got Grand Draco, Anubis, Blue Hybrid, and Ophanimon Lotmon. I don't have all the lists for you guys to cover on this, but it's just a good rendition to understand what's looking for here. But we obviously know that Crossheart's going to be the big bad of the format, followed by Yellow Hybrid, because it's all the tamer things, you know. And people will flock to Blue Flare, but then realize that if the OTK decks are just here to stay, we might just see the OT decks be there, and it's just going to be Yellow Hybrid, Crossheart, Jessamon, Grandis, Dark Knightmon, and X Antibody Alphamon. So that's kind of what I'm thinking prediction-wise, and that's just what we're going to see. So let's take a look at what, you know, a Shoutmon Crossheart looks like. You know, it's basically a very simplistic strategy here. Got Ballistamon, Dorumon, Shoutmon, Starmon, Sparrowmon, Shoutmon times 4, times 5. I mean, they're running Dexmon just because it's a good control card, and if you can splash it in your deck, why aren't you? So, I mean, you got Ties, you got Ty Kari, you got Mikey, you got Angie, you got Jeremy, Crimson Blade, Pyrosphere, and probably the most broken card in the world, Sunrise Burst. So, there's a reason for that, and we'll dive further into it afterwards. But here's like the Yellow Hybrid, and you might start seeing a little small trend here. You know, you got Yellow Hybrid, you got up to Jet Sylphie here, you have Dexmon, TK Kari, Sunrise Burst, Crimson Blaze, you know, Atomic Inferno, just because one of those can apply enough pressures, especially if that hits board early. Gilamon and Gigimon, you know, Pyrosphere for more draw. And like this is what you're going to expect. Flame Tornado, aka Holy Flame, Reinforced Mem Boost, all the good stuff. Kari, Zoe, TK Kari, and TK. Just gets really ridiculous. We'll go into depth more on this card afterwards. You know, Blue Flare, Digicross. I mean, the reason why it's doing so well is the ability to strip sources. If the deck can't handle the source removal, sometimes, like, if you have Sora and Joe out and your Digimon swings in, that might help you out enough to get the sources emptied, and then your opponent really doesn't have an out in certain circumstances. But, you know, there's just a lot of stuff going on for this deck. You know, it's just a very powerful deck in general. And it's going to be one of those decks that could definitely see play, but I feel like it's going to fall to the wayside. Jessamon's been doing really ridiculous because also it gets to play Solarmon. This card basically says, if you're going to be hard playing something, you can't reduce that play cost. And that shuts down really the big bad of the format, Crossheart. And if you look at it, they're not really applying a lot of security checks, especially when they don't need to now. And that's going to be one of the big things that you want to keep in mind, is that they're not applying a bunch of security checks to get shut down by, you know, Venusmon. So they're trying to play around that, and it's smart. I think it's very intelligent to see what they're trying to do here. And then, you know, Old Faithful, Alphamon, just being Alphamon, using Cool Boy, X Antibody, or Yukin mode, you know, you're just going to apply so much pressure your opponent might not have an out to your deck. The reason why I'm saying if they hit Jet Sylphie, this is probably what's going to take Yellow Hybrid's place, because nobody's playing a delicate plan. So, you know, that's something you need to keep in mind. This card is just ridiculous here, just because not even just because of the color restriction change, but being able to, if you have 3 security or more, one of your opponent's Digimon gets minus 10,000 DP for the turn, 1,000 DP for the turn. If your opponent has 3, if you have 3 or fewer security, place one of your opponent's Digimon face down at the top of their security stack, making it so that you get like 2 for 1 deals. This card is just, oh, it's 12,000. Sorry, 12,000, not 10. So just something to keep in the back of your mind, especially because we'll talk a little more in depth here. Let's go here. You know, Decker Greymon having Digicross for 2 metal and Decker Dramon. It's so easy to build the board into it. It's not even funny. You know, it has enough power behind it, and it also has armor purge. So if this dies for any reason, you're just gonna have still a body, and then you can just go kind of back into it again, especially with how the playstyle is. I mean, hey, just something to keep in the back of your mind. Things like Dark Knightmon X Antibody, being able to pop tamers is kind of huge, especially at well-timed, especially if they're building up like a couple tamers like that are with their, you know, cross hearts. You know, there's going to be times where it's just going to hit the right tamer at the right time. And then this is just going to apply so much pressure to your opponent because a well-timed one is ridiculous. The reason why this card is going to be ridiculous is that you may use an option with plug-in in its name or a yellow option with a memory cost 5 or less from your hand, ignoring the color restrictions without paying its memory cost. Then, after using that option, instead of trashing it, place it at the top of your security stack face down. So you want to guess what the main target for this card is? This thing. So you may play 1 red or yellow tamer, instantly gaining you a +1 for free, by the way, for probably a 3 cost. So this gets played. And then you get to -3,000 DP to something. So if you have, God forbid, 4 tamers after using that effect, your opponent is losing a 12,000 DP Digimon. If you got 5, you just killed any level 7 on the game board. So that's huge. And then instantly put it on the top of the security stack. Who at Bandai thought that was a great idea to put a level 5 option back at the top? They were like, yeah, we need to make yellow more broken. That is just the whole main idea of this. And that is basically play this, use Sunrise Burst on something, instantly put it at the top. Venusmon just slows down your opponent's stuff. But what's really nasty about Sunrise Burst is also the fact of the matter is that it can be played in Yellow Hybrid, but it can also be played in none other than our good friend Crossheart. So being able to have Crossheart be able to use this and then punish your opponent even further is huge, because that's a big answer threat, especially when you're trying to go for game. Like I said, Sora and Joe kind of combo really well for the Decker stuff. You know, just basically making it harder for your opponent, especially since you can lock things down. Jessamon GX. So while this Digimon has a card with Royal Knights in its traits, it's the Evolution cards. It gains piercing, blocking, security +1 for each. So, I mean, you could choose not to put a Royal Knight underneath it, and that instantly does help out, but there's no bridge gap that you don't actually have a Royal Knight underneath it. So it's just something to think about. Just well time against Venusmon, just taking it slow and just applying pressure really does help out. And then having Ginkamon X Antibody as one of those cards, you may place basically putting a self-protection and it can't be returned to their hands or decks or their DP reduced is huge. Pretty much helps counteract the Venusmon's minusing, you know, the security attack for the turn and then preventing your when digivolving when attacking skills. But we're going to have to see what happens from here. I mean, this format could definitely change up depending on what they do and what cards they might add into it. But we're going to have to wait and see what they do. So guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Remember, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace!